listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way.
Welcome to the party. I'm Shane.
I'm Graham.
I'm still Savage.
I'm Xaosseed.
And we're at the semi-finals. 64 RPGs walked into an arena and began eviscerating each other. And now only 8 are left. Folks, we've come a long way and produced an awful lot of hashtag content to get this far. But we must begin the finale, by which I mean the bit before the finale. We need to get to the finale, so we need to do this bit first.
Succinct?
Yes.
It just paints a picture. I can see the whole corpse-strewn battlefield before me, Warlord Scarr. It's true what they say that amateurs study tactics, but the pros study intros. So thanks for that.
I do my best.
The bracket fight.
I just would have stood on top of a burning car and shouted, "Welcome to Thunderdome!" and that would have been it.
Yeah, and speaking of welcomes, welcome back, Black Road 1. It's great to have you along again. It's been absolute age. I think, was it last year you were last on with us? Was it a bracket fight?
I don't know. Time no longer has any meaning. It was a bracket fight. And basically, I spend my time, much like the rest of us, in a non-Euclidean space, and I am only released when the stars align. So that's where we are today.
And what a conjunction it is. So it's great to have you back. And another returnee to the fold, to the fray even. The number cruncher, the stats eviscerator, the formulator. I ran out of good ones there. Xaosseed, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Fresh from the data swamps. I have trolled up some nonsense and crunched numbers and actually just having opinions that are subjective opinions. I'm here for a break.
And they are so subjective. But you've been offering your opinions, sometimes backed up with fact, for quite some time now. You've been blogging away, I see.
Yes, and reviewing stuff that is coming through my door from all of the Kickstarters I forgot that I backed that are now fulfilling. And it's like, oh yeah, this thing, which is a pleasant way to occupy the non-Euclidean time that Black Road 1 pointed out.
And circling back on that non-Euclidean time, Black Road, you've been, I see you've been presenting your own take on the ancient mysteries of gaming over on Twitch, haven't you?
To a degree, yeah. One of the problems that I have is whatever non-Euclidean space that I live in is poorly served by the entirely Euclidean Virgin media that provide me with my internet. So depending on its whims, some days my internet is so bad that I cannot stream, or I cannot watch a stream of another friend of ours running a 30-year-old game. I can't watch a man talking while playing a 2D isometric RPG from 30 years ago. So I've kind of knocked that on the head for the last little while because it just gets very frustrating. But if I can get a more consistent internet experience, I want to finish off the D&D games I've been running and then play some XCOM 2 and have everyone watch me do that, because I'm actually not bad at that game.
I'd love to see someone actually own that. I've dabbled but never really mastered it. Well, we'll be keeping an eye out and dropping a link somewhere on our Discord when you're back up and running and the stars align. Scarr, anything you've been ploughing away at or plugging away at?
Starting my new campaign. It's my usual brand of nonsense where it's like steampunk, but also Godzilla is there. But I'm the main twist this time is that as well as the players of the game, I'm also getting in a few side players to run NPC factions. And
red teaming.
Yes,
teams.
We may have an episode about this at some point, but it is fun to see. I feel like the best thing about the setting I've come up with is that I can allow other people to ruin it for me, and its greatest value.
So kaiju and steampunk in a world of magic and monsters. That's just the players. Excellent. I think a red teaming episode would be a great idea. Anyways, intros aside, so I just want to establish for our dear listeners that we are all more or less friends and have something going on outside of the eternal blood war that is the bracket fight. But that's the pleasantries aside. It's now time to start the fight.
Okay.
Bracket 1.
Bracket 104.
Blood. Sorry, I'm baying for blood.
Yes.
Blood.
It's an important thing to...
This really is it. There's no going back here. These are the final 8. So every single one of these has been cherished or argued for or propagandized for or simply, black bag
super
operated
easy matches the entire way to the championship.
Right, so whatever happens in this episode, we're bound to get foul calls. And we appreciate foul calls, dear listeners. We just may not pay attention to them all the time.
Yeah.
But that said, we'll be exploring ways for your voice to be heard before the final. So, with that cryptic and possibly not a promise made, let's look at the first bracket. What do we have?
We have Pathfinder, 2nd edition, and it is up against Call of Cthulhu. So, any edition. You can assume 7th if you really need to tie it down to a single. 7th
Whatever that current
one,
Cthulhu
right?
hotness is. Any Pathfinder players here? Great.
Oh my.
Any Call of Cthulhu players here?
I've played Cthulhu, not regularly, but...
Which, do we have a particular edition of Call of Cthulhu?
I think with the latest one, which I think is 7th. Folks, we're a very professional organisation here.
Yeah, I've played some of Masks of Nyarlathotep. I've played about 3 different editions of Cthulhu. I have Trail of Cthulhu here. I would consider myself a Cthulhu player.
Trail is the gumshoe system, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, so I think we knocked Gumshoe's in the running.
Gumshoe's
so
here.
Could be a crypto Gumshoe entry here. But I think we're looking at it as Call of Cthulhu, the sort of percentile.
I was really just trying to establish my credentials more than anything else. So that was it. It was bravado to mask it essential insecurity. That's you should take no more.
Much better than most of mine. But that's not a high bar. Okay, let's talk about the merits. Anyone feel particularly like evangelizing, which actually I learned is very much the Judeo-Christian version of proselytizing. So anyone want to speak the unholy rites and summon forth some support for Cthulhu, or do we feel like this game was just fine when it was 3.5, so we're going to make it better? Path that Pathfinder has taken should prevail here. God, that was convoluted.
Do you want to just go in order?
Or do we just vote and damn the consequences?
I think we should talk about it first.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's a real short episode.
Yeah.
That's of course, what the people are asking for, short episodes.
I'm happy to jump in with a couple of points on, basically, I've got one thing that I really like about Pathfinder and 3 things I really like about Cthulhu.
Well, you jumped. Off you go.
Okay. So the first thing is, Pathfinder, I have a lot of time for Pathfinder. I've not played it, but they just pump out gorgeous content. Even when I'm not playing it, I'm using their source books. The stuff that I grabbed off a Humble Bundle recently has been fantastic things for, even for not that system, just for the fluff. Just the sheer quantity of great stuff that they throw out. I have a lot of love for Pathfinder for inspiring all of that. The 2nd edition, I have not played it, but whatever keeps that kind of content stream going, I have time for. However, Call of Cthulhu, I think I'm going to have to jump for, because first off, Masks and some of the really amazing legendary campaigns have come out of Cthulhu. They are ones that people are like, it's a real badge of honor for having made your way through some of these Cthulhu campaigns. The second thing is I really like about Cthulhu is it is the international appeal. Places that aren't doing Dungeons and Dragons are playing Cthulhu, and it is places that don't like necessarily the swords and fantasy dragon slaying stuff are definitely Cthulhu is landing in there. And people are getting a lot of time out of it. And the last point for me is some of the most incredible LARPs I have ever played have been Cthulhu-based. And one of the most, shall we say, stark instances of a collective decision to just out and out murder a stranger has taken place in the Cthulhu lore. You know, unspoken, everybody's eyes meet, someone just gets stabbed up. It's like, Cthulhu is fantastic for those types of things, and for that, I'm going to go for Cthulhu.
You cherished that feeling of belonging to a bloodthirsty cult.
That snap moment of no one needed to speak, the eyes met, we looked at the stranger, it was like, them.
Yeah, it's quite obvious they had to die.
If people didn't cherish the idea of belonging to a bloodthirsty cult, evangelicism would go nowhere.
True, and we wouldn't have much of a bracket fight. So anyone else want to throw a bone or a hastily aimed hatchet?
Yeah, I'll check out.
I'll
you want to go first,
ahead.
Shane?
I'll try to keep this brief and fail. I've already stated the issue for me with Call of Cthulhu. It's not even that like the mythos is, you know, bad or boring or anything like that. It's just got stuff there, but just existential horror doesn't do it for me. It's not a space I want to explore in a game. It's far more. I'm going to be brutally honest. If I was a character in a Call of Cthulhu game, I'd be one of those rich toffs who, you know, buys a Necronomicon for the fun of it. You know, reads 3 pages going, these are some really cool ideas. Also, my arm is falling off and turning into slugs. I find the Cthulhu mythos far more engaging as a place to dispassionately observe and thought experiment about and turn into silly anime characters, than I do a place to, you know, grapple with the primal fear that all existence is insignificant. It doesn't grab me as a RPG space that I will get anything out of. Now, that is 100% a subjective opinion. It is entirely about me. Whereas Pathfinder, you know, I can imagine myself getting into that space. This space of, it's D&D. It's a little bit more crunchy in some places. It's got way more about playing footsies around the map. I have time for that. I can totally imagine myself, you know, at a table after the pandemic or on Roll20 or whatever, pushing lead around the map or virtual lead and, you know, getting flanking bonuses, using my level 13 special double sword technique. I can understand that. That clicks in my brain as the thing I could do. But Call of Cthulhu, I'm always going to be just weirdly dispassionate about, and you know that may denigrate me as a victim of the old one's malign influence, but it's my own personal thought on these.
Right. Black Robed one.
Yo, you can just call me Graham. I don't use Black Robed one as part of the podcast. It's just the name I have on whatever we're using.
Yeah, so to err on the side of privacy for people when we're doing these, but Graham, fine.
And I very much appreciate that, but I've consistently called myself by my name throughout the...
Sorry.
Yeah. Anyway, no worries. I should change it in the Discord. So, Pathfinder. I've played D&D since I was 10. I've kind of fallen a little bit out of love with D&D with 5th Ed. 5th Ed is a really good product, and I like it, but I think D&D still shows its chainmail roots in that it is half skirmish game. And the problem with that is its other half is it's an RPG. So you have this kind of slightly schizophrenic game where it facilitates role-playing, but if you've got 150 hit points, you're never going to get stabbed by a guy in the pub and die. You're never going to accidentally slip and knock yourself unconscious. You are a bag of hit points that need to be chipped away unless someone's got a status effect. Basically what I'm saying is I think that the dual nature of D&D as a... And I'd extend this to Pathfinder as well. This is what Shane was alluding to a minute ago. The dual nature of it as both a sort of small-scale skirmish game and an RPG kind of works against it as an RPG, I find, anyway. Cthulhu, on the other hand, you are most definitely mortal. Do not look at anything too hard or you might go insane and die. Your chances with a starting character of succeeding even rudimentary tasks are rather small. I think it gives a kind of an immersive... You don't have that security of being a bag of hit points, you know? Everything is to a degree a threat. And I think it creates a space that tells some very interesting stories, or has the potential to tell some very interesting stories. I've also always liked that the bad guy in the Call of Cthulhu mythos is basically evolution. What's the point of all of this? No point. Just here. So that speaks to me on a personal level as well. So you can probably see which direction I'm going to jump in. In case you can't, it's Call of Cthulhu.
Okay. Yeah. So, a good skirmish game. Definitely. And I do appreciate Pathfinder, especially Second Ed, for just embracing the skirmish tabletop side of role-playing fully. Very fully. Probably a lot more than 5th Ed at this point. And then Call of Cthulhu, as I say, you shouldn't try to know too much. It will kill you. So there are contrasts in that respect. Pathfinder Second Ed rewards mastery of the game at the kind of the rules level, and the setting. Lots to be said for the setting and the dozens of adventures they put out. Very high quality and all really well supported by bestiaries and background information and fully fleshed out maps and NPCs, etc. And then Call of Cthulhu, long literary history. A lot of people who will talk about it at length for its exploration of what it is to be human, our place in the universe, delving into the mysteries of the human mind and heart and soul. But fundamentally a game where it's difficult and dangerous to know too much about the world. I've a lot to say for both of them. I'm not going to ramble on about how undecided I am, but in the interest of seeing the skirmish tabletop side of the game stay in this fight up against all the narrative beasts, I'm going to go with Pathfinder here. So can we just get a tally of hands here? Who's for Pathfinder? Aye. That's 2. And who's for Cthulhu?
Aye.
Right, well, we have a a need for tiebreaker. And before we started recording, folks, we decided each of the hosts this evening was going to get one veto, one tiebreaker in each round. And in the first round, it is by alphabetical order of tag. It's Graham who.
Although if he was written in as Graham, he would still be him.
Exactly. So it was foretold and foreseen. So Graham, it's a tiebreaker, and I imagine you're going to cast for.
The universe is cold and cruel. I cast for Call of Cthulhu.
So there it is, the end of the 3.5 lineage. Down it goes into existential darkness, and the old ones rise again. Call of Cthulhu takes the first round.
Turns
Pathfinder.
out Call of Cthulhu can't just be killed with hit point damage.
There you go. Right, so I'm going to record that winner. And on we go. So what is our second round?
Second round. Sorry?
Deadlands versus Lancer, I think, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is the venerable Weird West Cowboys and Zombies game Deadlands versus newcomer libertarian Doom Robots simulator Lancer. Is it Liberty? No. I'm thinking of a completely different sci-fi game.
Luxury space communism, man.
Oh yes, that's right. Fully automated space communism.
Fully automated luxury space communism.
Right, so we did finally sit down and play Lancer very briefly with the help of Hida Eoin, who ran it for us, and we did a live stream of it, or as close as we get. You can find it on YouTube and our Twitch channel, I believe. Check the show notes for links. So here we have Deadlands, sort of a niche favourite. There aren't a lot of zombie apocalypse, Wild West, weird science games out there. This is probably the one that most easily comes to people's minds. And then there's Lancer. It's a mech game. On the surface, there's a few of those, but it's a mech game with a very particular bent and a very, very modern sort of system design focus. Right? Any favourites here? Anyone who has a soft spot for zombies in Stetsons? No. Okay. Well, I'll give my thoughts then. Deadlands is as I said, very niche game, gorgeous game, and has had its ups and downs, its chops and changes of systems. Unfortunately, probably ended up with Savage Worlds, didn't it? And strayed from its card-based routes, which had a lot of flavour, which I think is always good fun. On the system side for Lancer, the flavour in the system comes in gear licenses and slotting different equipment onto your stock mech as you advance as a pilot. So, and it's hugely sort of thematically kind of plays in the idea that you're always on the lookout for the next upgrade and configuring your build and customizing your mech, while remaining relatively system light, which I like in a mech game. I think they often make the mistake of going too far into the data sheets and sort of ablative armors and damage tables. But Lancer ticks along. I am not as wild about the setting as the system, and having given it a little time to simmer, I still think it's quite derivative. Deadlands, however, remains really fresh and really sort of, people will still go, oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, why aren't there more of those? When people talk about the Weird West. So, yeah, that's kind of where I land on those two. Anyone else?
I don't really know anything about Lancer, despite the fact you guys played it. I very shamefully didn't catch that, but I will. I'll go to YouTube and presumably watch all of their videos and become radicalized. That's what YouTube
Bump
does.
those numbers.
That's it, yeah. It's really weird that we've created a Rube Goldberg machine for radicalizing people when really all we were trying to do was watch pictures of cats and Rick Astley. So I will have a look at that. Deadlands I've never played, but Hida Owen has been such a remarkable champion for the game throughout the years that I think the love he has for it really shines through. So not knowing too much about the two of them, but knowing, I think a solid endorsement from Hida Owen is good enough for me. I'm gonna go on the Deadlands side.
Okay, so it's an interesting thing on the endorsements in that, like, I've not played Deadlands myself, but I've watched a bunch of like solid players, particularly the old Sligo gang, love their Deadlands. And again, on that, like, I'm willing to put a lot of credence onto that. And if any of them opened up a table, said, we're running Deadlands, do you want to sit down? I'd absolutely sit down to play it. However, I would actually take the opposite view to what Mick was saying, in that Deadlands is a Weird West setting. To me, there's a bunch of Weird West settings out there. There is no shortage of them. You can get a whole bunch of different takes on it. But Lancer dropped through my mailbox a while ago, and it's like, despite the fact that it's an absolute donkey killer of a hardback, I sat down and I read it, and I was really taken by the setting. I haven't gotten to actually play it at the table, but I really appreciated the stream to show, like, here's how the nuts and bolts work. But I loved the Lancer setting, as it was the first time in, I can't recall how long, I saw an optimistic future. And it really struck me as the closest I've seen to Banks's The Culture realized as a game setting.
Okay.
Where there's a sense of, like, there's, sure, the future's in the balance, and, like, there's everything to play for, so strap on your mech and get out there and make sure that the decent version of the future happens. But it's not, the corps have already locked everything down and it's just a question of, like, trying to eke a living until you die, or it's not the, it's the, not the Star Trek, everything's already been solved. And you're just a question of, like, your caretakers and everything, this sort of luxury space utopia, and you're just out there, like, weeding. Lancer, it's like there's a chance to tilt the balance for the better.
Nice.
And I really like that setting, and it made me want to go, like, hey, I want to sit down and play this game. So I'd throw my vote for Lancer on that basis.
Kind of edging towards Lancer. Scarr?
Looks like we may have an incoming enemy battleship coming in at high speed.
I was going to see if we could get him to burst forth with objections. We do have joining us.
I heard Deadlands was in trouble. I came running.
It's okay, Owen.
Exactly.
Basically, 20 years of you telling me how good the game was has already convinced / brainwashed me, so I'm already voting for it, so you've already got my vote. These other guys, though, you might need to work on them.
Hida, you heard us recording, and you decided there was no way...
Literally ran in from the gym.
Maybe even heard that I would have the casting vote here in the event of a tie.
Gasp.
Yeah, I know.
We can't have that.
I mean, you
can't
can't
just-
really trust me with. I mean, I got Lancer this far.
You can't just
I
say
can't be
gassed, man.
trusted.
You can actually gasp. Come on.
Hida, welcome to the
I'm
bracket
trying to.
fight.
I'm literally, legitimately trying to control my breath, so I don't sound like
Sorry.
a pervert who's just heard something terrible.
Sorry, you're already
Okay.
dangerously overgasped. My bad. Sorry.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Deadlands, right? Deadlands is an amazing setting with some of the worst rules in first edition of an RPG that I've ever seen print. The core mechanic is alright. All of the magic systems are various degrees of garbage apart from miracles. Basically, the shaman magic system destroys the ability to participate in half of the pre-written adventures. The weird science basically involves a huge amount of hand waving and talking with your GM between sessions. The poker probabilities were nobody who understands poker probabilities looked at the probabilities of it all, because they determine things like, for example, well, it's pretty easy to get 2 pair and 6 cards, right? It is not pretty easy to get 2 pair and 6 cards. You've about an 8% chance of succeeding at that. So it's one of the worst core systems ever, but the setting's really good, and a lot of the adventures are a lot of fun. On the other hand, you have Lancer, where the core system has benefited from a lot of modern games design, and it's actually a really good core system. It's really cool. In terms of building a mech, you basically get to go and build a genuinely custom mech that feels and plays differently based on your decisions. That's so rare in RPGs. Very few RPGs do that. Most of them are in the fantasy space. Almost none of them are in the sci-fi space. Almost none of them are in the sci-fi mech space. So that's a huge plus for it. Lancer's difficulty is its immaturity as a system and a setting. They haven't got a big adventure out for you, everybody to try out and see this is how the game plays. So there's a difficulty with assessing Lancer in that they're working on a big campaign called Wallflower. It's not out yet. It's out in a kind of a draft format, which is still very unready. And as for the setting, the setting is, there's some really nice ideas in there. It's a bit preachy. It's a bit, this is the future as 2021 Twitter would see it. So it's very much a product of its time. I don't know how well it will last, or will it date very badly. So on this one,
Okay, maybe let's keep people guessing just for a moment. Scarr, you've also played Lancer.
Mm-hmm. I was indeed subjected to Lancer by Mr. Eoin. I feel like
I'm going to
still
push
want
you
to
to say something.
really get it.
about.
What? Sorry?
Is it better than Deadlands? Is it worse than Deadlands?
It engages me way more than Deadlands does. It's like, yeah, it's crunchy, it's maybe not going to be the narrative smooth play by the apocalypse thing that some people are expecting, but it has got a good core system, and a nice, workable, building system. Like, I really want to really get into it, more as a thing. I could understand people's worries about the setting. I'm slightly less worried about that, because I'm the kind of person who tweaks settings anyway, usually to add in dumb anime that I've watched as a bigger thing. But I've been searching for a really solid mech system that I could just sell to people for decades. Well, close to decades. There's certainly a decade multiple of developing there. But yeah, Lancer sort of is what I've been wanting for years in a game. Whereas Deadlands has been more of a curiosity. I might be going back on stuff I said in previous rounds, but I do like
Good company.
At least you're consistent.
Wait. Yeah, like Deadlands, I can understand the appeal of, it's cool. It's got that nice mix of real setting and fantasy elements that I can engage with, but it always feels more like a curiosity to me than a thing I need to jump on. It's cool that it exists things, and I would play it if I had the right group game, but it's not filling a need for me like I think Lancer is going to in the future. Like it's just not on the same wavelength for me. But I can totally understand its legacy, and I can totally see why people really latch onto it and love it so much. So, for me personally, it has to be Lancer, but like I respect the Deadlands posse, as it were.
So, I think that's we've all sort of voiced our opinion there, haven't we?
I feel like.
So let's just go down the list. Graham.
I cast my vote for Deadlands.
Hida win.
I vote for Deadlands because Lancer doesn't have an adventure yet.
Scarr.
I vote Lancer because it's what I need.
And Xaosseed.
Lancer for the setting.
Yeah, it looks like you.
That I am going to decide this after all.
Prophetic.
This is about the greatest RPG of all time. Neither of these probably qualify. One, because the Deadlands has chopped and changed, and as inconsistent as I am, I like to see a through line on long-running systems. I think dropping the Wild West kind of card mechanic stuff was a mistake. They should have stuck with it and made it work. Get the numbers boys in to fix it. Texas Hold'em's fun. Lancer, love the system. And I'm not down on the setting. I'm very familiar with the setting. I've seen it produced in parts in other places perfectly well. They borrowed from the best and then preached about how it was great and brilliant in the one true way. Xaosseed, I fundamentally disagree. I think it's a incredibly under the hood. It's written as an incredibly oppressive setting that wants you to believe that it has cracked the one true way for humanity to be happy. And this is the in-game sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. Anyway, all in all, however, I'm going to jump ship from Lancer and give it to Deadlands. The Wild West is a place that has a lot of problems, and they're not exactly swept under the rug in Deadlands, but they're there to explore. A future where someone tells me they've solved the mystery of the human heart, I can't really get behind. I'll definitely borrow that system and run a Titanfall game in it or something, but it's not a setting I'd carry with me into the future. So I'm going to give it to Deadlands.
Okay.
Right. I think that's a win
Well
for
fought.
Deadlands in this one.
Well fought for the newcomer, but
it's not going to cross that current
harrowed
final hurdle.
harrowed old competitor and could take nuclear death sword missiles like a champ.
There's not a word in that sentence I do not love.
Let's crack on then. Having buried one of the ghosts of my past, let's move on.
This is where the knives come out. It's the big one, folks. This is where the angry emails start.
Yeah, so we go into the third bracket, and it is the Gumshoe system, which holds a few different settings under its umbrella, and D&D 5th Ed, which of course everyone on the internet will tell you can be used to run any game in any time period, in any setting.
Can be, but should it be, becomes the question.
We've had multiple episodes about this.
The answer is no. So, I don't want to touch this one, to be perfectly honest.
Oh, I do. Here, I'll start. I'll start. Because these are the two systems that I'm running at the moment. I'm running a 5th Ed D&D game and a Gumshoe game. And as I may have alluded earlier on with Pathfinder 2nd Ed, I was tarring it with some of the sins of D&D 5th Ed. They're the same sins. It's not. I don't think I'm falsely applying that. But the schizophrenia between D&D's origins as a small unit tactical combat and the fact that it is now supposed to be ostensibly a role-playing game really kind of pulls you in two different directions. And it means that you have players who are trying to accomplish two often mutually incompatible things. I've got almost all of the 5th Ed books. I'm playing in a 5th Ed campaign. I'm running a 5th Ed campaign. It's grand. It does what it needs to do reasonably well. but what it needs to do is two different things. And one of the strengths making it a small unit tactics game pull away from it being an RPG. And in fact, they work at odds with one another. I talked a bit about that in the Pathfinder Second Ed, and I presume the people who heard me talking 20 minutes ago are still here, so I'm not going to go back over it again. Gumshoe I like. I am running the Dracula dossier at the moment, which is a great game. Lots of depth. It's a very interesting tool for telling a story. The rules are not terribly complex, but I think complicated enough. I like the way investigative skills work to keep the things flowing. Your players are still making choices about resource allocation because they're deciding when they want to spend their points. And you have a bit more control about when you want to be successful. If you need to be successful at a particular point, you can really push and do that. And it may be that it is just a new system for me, and I've been playing 5th Ed D&D now for a couple of years, whereas Gumshoe is still relatively new. But I think Gumshoe does a better job at being a role-playing game. And it facilitates the telling of a story, which I think is, I think pick one. And I think that one of the problems is trying to use 5th Ed for everything. You have a tendency to go, it's a role-playing game, let's role-play in it. It is a bit, but largely what it actually is a refinement of the chainmail rule set from about 40 years ago. So I will be giving my vote to Gumshoe.
Let's jump all the way down the ladder to the X's and O's. Xaosseed? Any thoughts?
I was trying to hide at the back until I heard other people.
Oh, no, I saw you.
God. Foo. Okay, well, so on the point of view of I'm currently waiting for Swords of the Serpentine, which is the Gumshoe fantasy thing to turn up. I've got it on pre-order. I'm waiting for that to show. Because I'm running, my home campaign at the moment is D&D 3.5, but it's D&D. And I'm finding kind of what Graham's alluding to, that we're running a noble house, lots of intrigue, lots of mystery, couple of swords drawn, fancy stuff, but it means that, character sheets are not cracked open for a big block of time, and I strongly suspect I'm not using the correct system, but I'm using what I've got on my shelves. So, 5e has gotten a considerable amount of cash from me. I've got a rack of books over there that are 5e. And I'm going to give a lot of kudos to 5e for the ecosystem, for just this huge push of let's get people on board. Let's show people, let's build out the hobby more. I know, certain members of around the table here are going to have views on, it's eating the seed corn and it's getting people into one system. They don't go to other systems. But I think, while giving it credit for it's managed, it's refined where it was and it has gotten more people in. Gumshoe is the thing that, for the game that I run, I suspect it's the system, I want to have for my fantasy playing, for that kind of do the investigations, build up the points, and use that to run your games. On the other hand, 5e, I go down my Friday nights, we play Adventurers League. It is what it is. Bunch of strangers with nebulous backstories turn up, kicking doors, slay things to achieve plot points, do that. That's a lot of fun for what it is, but it is what it is. Turning up, running skirmishes, wandering away. I don't know where I get to throw my vote here, because I know which one I want to win, but then I have to say, it's who have I spent hours on the table on? Yeah.
You don't have to justify the fickle chambers of your heart to us.
Probably can't.
Yeah,
Okay, do you want to wait until we call the roll?
Okay, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'd say we'll go to someone with very firm views now. Who I imagine that might be. Hida.
Okay. On the topic of Gumshoe, Gumshoe does some quite clever things. Had a lot of really good ideas a few years ago in terms of going, when you're in an investigation, you spend the points, you get the information you want to use. Did some very nice things in Dracula Dossier with props, where effectively when you get a clue, you get a little card to represent that clue. And then when you go to do an op, you basically assemble all those cards into a little psycho wall, and that's the total number of bonuses you get to use during that thing. So you go into an infiltration on the castle, you throw out the 12 clues that are applicable to the castle, and you have 12 plus 2 bonuses to use at any point during your infiltration because you've done all the research beforehand. That's really clever. That gamifies the investigation really nicely, and the more prep you do, the more information you have going in, the better you're going to do. And you can use those to retroactively retcon things and say, actually, we already got the key to this place, or actually, we already know there's a vampire in here, so I did bring the stake, and basically, I did bring my stake launcher, you know? That's really cool. Combat-wise, it's a functional combat system, which is vaguely annoying. I played the Knights Dark Agents or Knights Black Agents, which is the most developed of the combat system. It's not terribly interesting, but if you want a more investigatory focused game, you want combat to be a very sometimes food. It only happens occasionally. It's very dangerous. That's what it is, and that's fine. But it's not an everyday occurrence. And that's grand. That's grand. But it's just, if you were going into it looking for a good combat experience, I would not expect a really good combat experience. I would expect a tense, very occasional combat experience, and that's about it. 5th Ed D&D is the RPG I have the most contempt for of any RPG in print. It is the Michael Bay's Transformers. If everyone was exposed to Transformers through Michael Bay and saw it through that lens, a little bit of my soul would shrivel up and die. Because this is the laziest RPG ever produced. That's what kills me about it. These are the production team with the most resources, the most ability to try new things, to push the hobby forward. And they tried with 4th Ed, got a bad reaction, basically flipped their tail feathers up and retreated way back into 2nd Ed D&D and took out everything that anyone found vaguely controversial in the game. They've made no attempt to push forward and expand the RPG's technical space. They've gone way back into, just the GM will sort that. The GM's the rules patch. The GM will decide that. The GM, we're not going to make any rulings. We're not going to say anything. The GM will fix your problems. And it's dreadful. It's dreadful to see a company that are have the most resources, who are by an order of magnitude the largest company involved, basically go, we're not going to do any development. We're not going to really work hard at this. We're just going to put this content out there. We're going to get freelancers to write all our adventures. We will basically be supervisors on an IP. That's the extent of our involvement. Of course, it's by far the most successful version of D&D. Irony would demand nothing else. RPGs are made by mad passion. This is the one RPG that is produced purely as product. It drives me bananas. So I'll vote for Gumshoe, because Gumshoe actually gives a damn about itself. That's it.
Scarr, do you want to jump in, or will I leave you the final thought?
No, I'll go now.
I was going to keep it brief and then give you the floor. How's that?
No, I should get this out of the way. I've been wrestling with this ever since we started with 4 people, and I thought I would have to be the tiebreaker on this.
Are you going to say OSR at any point?
No. All the OSR entries have been purged from this from the beginning, mostly because we didn't put in basic D&D in the first list. I feel like I want to respect 5e. I want to respect the monolith that it has. I want to respect the number of people that's gotten into the hobby, whether they're converts or not. I feel like I want to say rising tides lift all boats and all that stuff. But as I've gotten older, I guess I'm a bit more cognizant of the sort of negative space, the opportunity cost of one person's success or one product success. Could another game have, done the good things that 5th Ed did? We may never know now, because that space is filled with, Critical Role fans now. And it's just I really feel like 5th Ed is a good game. But if I have to eliminate one game from the universe and put their other on a pedestal, honestly, the game I haven't actually played, Gumshoe, I want to sort of elevate it more, because I feel like that it feels unfair to say this because, like, I've just sort of been looking at Gumshoe through a telescope. It seems at times, just sort of observing off the. I'm waiting for Swords of Serpentine too. I am really curious as to, like, how do they do fantasy? How do they do that weird rooftop? What's the game? Dishonored style, mixed with, Dishonored plus Sherlock Holmes plus, Cadfell. It sounds crazy and weird, and I love it.
Oh wow, Cadfell.
I love that.
That's a deep
I love
cut.
that you're desperately trying to sort of be reverential to 5th Ed D&D, while myself and Owen are over there kneeling on its chest and beating it about the head and neck.
I guess, like, it 5th Ed just feels sort of insubstantial enough that I guess I'm more respecting its success than I'm respecting the game itself. And once, that logic tricks, I realize, like, the game itself is immaterial to this, whereas Gumshoe is doing things. Gumshoe is, trying to push the thing forward. It's a niche game that is trying a whole bunch of genres. Like, it is pushing itself forward and trying to stretch itself to do all sorts of things while still having its core niche of focusing on investigation and mystery. So I just feel like it just seems to have more value as a thing. Whereas, there's a whole bunch of OSR D&D clones that I could steal from at any moment. In fact, we've just gotten a new one from Craven Crawford. The free version of Worlds Without Number is out. You can just start playing the fantasy version of Stars Without Number right now, with all those old DM's Guild Adventures. 5th Ed as a phenomenon is strong, vital, and powerful. D&D is 5th Ed as an RPG system is insubstantial fluff. It's a weird thing to come to it, but I can't really come to any other conclusion right now. I feel very weird for saying this, but yeah.
Okay. I've come not to praise D&D 5th Ed, but to bury it. The God Emperor of mankind, Leto II, understood the danger of the Golden Path, the one true way forward into a manifest destiny. He understood that way lay stagnation. There may be triumphs and glory along the way, but ultimately it would lead to ruination, stagnation, and eventual collapse. He turned his back on the monolithic, shining Golden Path and shattered humanity and its single destiny into a myriad kaleidoscope of possibilities. And I think that's what we have to do here today. I'm largely in agreement with most of what's been said. 5th Ed has become something to be managed by a team of IP herders. It has dragged a lot of people into a creative cul-de-sac in the hobby. Now, I will take exception with the idea that these people are somehow terminal cases. I think they'll get their taste of role-playing, sure enough, from 5th Ed. I don't think they'll stop there. But when they turn away from the monolith, they're going to need to find something else. And Gumshoe is just one of the many games that represents that something else. I really like... I mean, it's a bit long in the tooth now in terms of innovation, but what it did around avoiding the collapse of a narrative investigation through some clever rules and systems is exactly where I like to see that marriage between the number crunching and the system stuff and the desire to tell a story. I'd really like to see just a straight Raymond Chandler-esque setting written for Gumshoe, because I think the investigation, the hard-boiled dick, is a good genre and doesn't really need vampires or esoteric forces to prop it up. Although I'm glad to see the people who write for Gumshoe systems do those things, because they're all so different from picking up your broadsword or waving your wizarding wand. They're a little more real to me, and they have the horrible, dirty sex and violence that makes a more mature story with fedoras and cigarettes smoked and bourbon drank and all the rest. Femmes fatale. Is that how you do it? No, maybe not. Okay.
You said broadsword. Weird,
So
by the way. Yeah.
Broadsword, yeah.
What sword?
And I do love and do appreciate where D&D 5th Ed came from. But yeah, it's a retreat back from the precipice of actually showing people how to maintain a brand while innovating wildly. 4th Ed didn't do a lot wrong, in my opinion, except be a little too mathematically flat. Everything else was kind of good. Right, so that's 5th Ed's coffin nailed shut. Can I just get a show of hands? Are we unanimous on this? Is anyone sticking up for 5th Ed? It is a clean sweep then for Gumshoe.
Wow.
Crack on. All the Titans fall.
So it would seem. All right.
And on we go.
All right. So, final round of this semi-final. We have Blades in the Dark, the ghost punk thievery simulator that has spawned an entire genre of not quite powered by the apocalypse games, versus Wrath and Glory, the latest 40k RPG produced right here in Meath. Well, not right
I'm going to
here.
go first then. Like, how could I follow up that little speech and not champion this new flowering of creativity that is a kind of weird synthesis between the very narrative powered by the apocalypse system it grew out of and something that I just the right amount of crunch. It's got base building, it's got great downtime mechanics. Blades in the Dark is set in a weird demon whale blood powered alternative space, a Dickensian London submerged into a pocket dimension of darkness. It's got lots of cool flavor that doesn't ignore the need for your classes to be different. It's got lots and lots and lots of variations on the kind of game you can play, more or less centered around the gang warfare and heist sort of Blades or Lies of Lochlamora Dishonored style setting. It has lots of variation offshoots that are breathing new life into other genres and settings, like it's got a Black Company. It's got a Black Company variation. It's got a Star Wars variation that apparently runs quite well and is quite well suited to rogues and
yeah, I'd say it would work quite well with Star Wars.
So I don't have a lot against Wrath and Glory, except it's.
I just think I'd say, having played it, I was just agreeing with you. I'd say it would work very well with Star Wars.
I don't have a lot against Wrath and Glory, except it's another system strapped onto a license that is perfectly well served by lots of others. And the best days of the 40k IP might yet lie ahead. They're doing really interesting things in the story, but that story doesn't need another RPG to tell it, and probably won't, in fact. So I'm going to go with Blades big time here. Pass the buck.
Okay. I'll go next. I still have a weird nostalgic fondness for the Dark Heresy and the Wolfrup-derived versions of 40k RPG. They didn't really work. They weren't well balanced. There was all kinds of nonsense involved. But the jank of the system really just sold the jank of the setting to me in a weird way. So I've always been really curious about Wrath and Glory, and the difference and the more modern design, and just kept wondering to myself, is it too good for 40k? Is it too well designed to really reflect the nonsense and pointless jank of the setting? I don't know, because I haven't yet been able to find a hardcover in these COVID times. I haven't found the strength of will to order a copy and have it delivered. It hasn't grabbed me as this is something I need. Whereas I very happily have a copy of Blades in the Dark on my shelf, and I'm still brainstorming ways to bring it to the table. Will I try running a weird thief style D&D with it? Will I run it as is in the game? Will I run it with sci-fi? Will I run it, Blades of the Dark speaks to a creative space that I can use. It's sort of like Powered by the Apocalypse in that each different iteration of it has been fine-tuned for its genre to emulate its particular niche, and its flexibility might take a little dive there, but the core of the system is so fluid and well working that it sort of invites people to make that jump to try to design together their own version of it for their own particular genre. And of course the setting in the book is very nice, very evocative, ghosts and demon whales and canals full of mushrooms, and if you kill someone, a crow just lands on their body and starts making very suspicious noises. And then you have a problem that you have to deal with, which is a cool mixture of setting and theme. No, I really do have to give this Blades in the Dark. It is just Wrath and Glory is probably fine. Blades in the Dark is charging forward through the shadows with, Switchblade, and it's spending points to have body armor and chloroform, and it has a plan, but it only has 2 dice to succeed on it. So we'll see where this goes. Does that make any sense? It probably didn't make any sense.
For anyone who knows Blades, it's a perfectly good way of summing up. Right, we're not ready to sum up yet. We still have to hear from the majority, so this could all tip. You understand? It's all to play for. So who wants to big up 40k, or Wrath and Glory in this case? Let's move on to... we'll cycle back to Graham.
Yeah, I haven't played Wrath and Glory because it's produced in Meath, and Meath is outside of 5 kilometres from where I live, so thus it may as well be on Mars. The 40k games in general that I've played, I have not terribly enjoyed. The system has gotten in the way of actually doing stuff. They're very crunchy. Now, hopefully Wrath and Glory has addressed some of that. I honestly don't know. I haven't played it. I have played Blades in the Dark, or at least I played the beta. I think the actual game that ended up being produced was a little bit different from the game that I played. But the setting was very similar. And it was something different. And different is good, Something new and something interesting. Very sort of Fallen London in its... it's a browser-based game people may or may not have played. Very Fallen London in its sort of idiom. I played the one where you are in a ship. Sunless Sea. It's a computer game based in the Fallen London setting. And I loved Sunless Sea. It was great. So I have a huge fondness for Blades in the Dark. I think as well, 40k has a tendency to, everyone is at least ostensibly, and your buy-in and mileage may vary, but everyone's at least ostensibly some sort of crazy death cultist living in the 41st millennium, fighting against anything that looks vaguely different to you. And frankly, if anything, that's too close to real life. What I require is some sort of, interesting escapism, where you may be able to make your fortune on the on the grim streets of the quasi Dickensian London that is the setting for Blades in the Dark. It brings with it some sort of ephemeral, you're already damned probably, or dead maybe, but maybe somewhere out there there's hope. There's no hope in 40k. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. So I think paradoxically it's the more uplifting and hopeful of the systems for me. Also, I've not played Wrath and Glory, as I said, so it would be hypocritical of me to vote for a system that I can't actually stand behind. Blades in the Dark, I think.
Right. Xaosseed, what do the numbers say, if anything?
Well, I mean, okay, so the 40k universe and systems that can run in it, there's a lot of love for that. Definitely it's among things that people are doing in Roll20. There's definitely the various 40k settings. It's up there. It's one of the things that people like to do. I think after you go, I believe it's anyway. So after you do, after you go down from what's in like the D&D systems, Pathfinder, D&D 5e, and Call of Cthulhu, then you're into the fantasy Wolfrup and 40k. So it's definitely, there's a lot of love from people for that. And I think it's like a system that allows people to access that IP. My perspective here, as I was listening to what Graham was saying, is like, if I could get my hands on a DM who was expert, who really loved these systems and was willing to put on a table playing this game, I would love to sit to a table of Wrath and Glory. I would love to be able to just like sort of strap on and get stuck into a well-run 40k setting. I just like this sort of the madness of it. Someone who could let me run through the Eisenhorn trilogy of that kind of like crazy Inquisitor type stuff. I'd be all down for that. And definitely that over a Blades in the Darks thing. But on a system that I think I'm going to run, Blades in the Dark, the Black Company variant. Bands of Blades. Yeah, Bands of Blades, that's definitely my particular sweet spot of what I would like to run. The sheer scale of the 40k IP and trying to get that fine tune right of a small number of people can make a difference when we know that planets and armadas sometimes can't make a difference in this setting. I think I know which one I'd love to play if I could find someone who would do it, but I think of systems that are going to be useful, that will come to my table, that would give me more tools in my toolkit. I think Blades in the Dark is the one that I got to throw like my penny for that one, because it gives me more tools in my toolbox.
Okay, so that leaves us with Hida in. You want to upset the apple cart here, or is there anything you want to say to add to the pile-on?
Wrath is the little system that wouldn't die, which is funny because it doesn't generate that mad passion that the D100 takeoff. That was an engine that put out 5 game lines. Mm-hmm. And each one subtly and maddeningly different, so they weren't fully compatible with each other, but very close to being compatible with each other. Each one changing and tweaking the rules in a weird little way. I played a lot of Dark Heresy. The game broke horrendously at high XP. I had a ton of fun with it. It was it was actually very close to a Slay campaign of you playing basically investigators working for an Inquisitor, wombling around, doing pre-written adventures and homebrew adventures in a big, long, sprawling campaign that had a really epic ending, and that was pretty great. I mean, I really got a lot of that. It was a great gaming experience. Wrath and Glory is cut from some of the same cloth. It's got this kind of dice pool system that's the numbers are a little more bound on. It does some clever ideas with its bad guys. I think it's probably a more balanced RPG, but I haven't got in and done the couple of months of play you really need to get in before you can give that answer for sure. At first glance, it looks a bit better balanced, but this is an RPG well into its second edition from a different publisher, after Ulysses had to give up publishing it, and Cubicle 7 have suddenly picked up the ball and kind of going, but we're already doing an awful lot with Warhammer Fantasy and Soulbound. I'm not sure this is the right time for us to have... Okay, yeah, I guess we've got this one as well. I guess we'll do this too. The killer app for Wrath and Glory is not out yet. They have done a bunch of short adventures which are very much in the style of old Dark Heresy. They're kind of your sort of investigators going into an area to pick something up. The killer app for Wrath and Glory will be doing a pre-published campaign about liberating the system you're in. If you do that correctly and pull that out and put it together an epic campaign about liberating a world, maybe from the grips of the chaos of the arch enemy or something else, putting together an alliance to do that, like, you know, all the bits and pieces to go, I think that could be a really special gaming experience. But it's not out yet. It's not there yet. It's still coming together as a system in some ways. Blades in the Dark is very good at doing what it's doing. It's a great heist RPG, and there's probably only like 2 of them. So I've got to pay it homage for that. It doesn't have a lot of pre-done stuff. It is very much you build your own one, which for good and bad, that is the way of it. So I would probably lean towards Blades in the Dark because I think it did a lot of really cool stuff. But I think Wrath and Glory has the potential, if taken in the right direction, to be something really special. It's just not there yet. So I can't vote for it yet. I've got to vote for Blades.
I think that's another clean sweep then, if my failing memory is...
means that Blades of the Dark is exactly as good as Gumshoe.
Yes, that's what that means. Those two things are equivalent.
Yes.
We'll see.
Yep.
Okay, well, this episode, being the semi-final, is markedly better than previous bracket fight episodes. I think we can all agree, as we are one step closer to finishing out this long war. Graham, would you like to just sum up for anyone who's coming in late, just sum up the brackets?
Absolutely.
And the winners
So first
this
of all,
evening?
we started with Pathfinder 2nd Ed and Call of Cthulhu. We hadn't Hida Owen's decisive contribution at that point, so it went down to a tie. We'd agreed beforehand that there was going to be a tiebreaker mechanism. I was the arbiter for that, and I summarily dispatched Pathfinder 2nd Ed in favour of Call of Cthulhu. But we also had it very close in terms of Deadlands and Lancer. It went 3-2 in favour of Deadlands. It squeaked ahead by a hair, Deadlands being zombies in the Old West, Lancer being some sort of communist utopia where you have mechs, I'm given to believe. Our third and fourth fights were much more decisive, though. We had the Knives Out and the Murder Squads prepped, where Gumshoe swept D&D 5 Ed completely, 5-1, and Blades in the Dark also summarily executed Wrath and Glory by a similar margin. So moving into what I believe now is pretty much almost the end, it's going to be Call of Cthulhu versus Deadlands versus Gumshoe versus Blades in the Dark. And who knows which of those four excellent games will turn out to be, for all time, the greatest RPG ever, as agreed by everyone. That's how I understand this to work.
Yes.
We represent everyone through every continuum of possible experience for now and forever. Amen.
Yeah. This is what we get like the next moon mission. It's going to take a stone with this so it will be preserved past the death of the Earth.
Also, this is the one we're really going to get angry emails about.
Hopefully, yes.
This is the episode that's really going to kick everything off.
And you don't have to wait for us to reply to an email. You can jump on our Discord, link in the show notes, and give us both barrels there as we enter a four-way firefight for what I think is probably going to be the finale. Now, the details of that are going to be sort of hashed out between the party members over the next little while. Hida, any preference? Do we sort of just roll dice? Do we elect champions? Do we debate it out town hall style? Do we try and simulate based on roll 20 numbers? What are we going to do here? Any thoughts?
My thing will be many people as possible together. We have a round table and vote. That's the way we've been doing it so far. I'm not a big fan of changing resolution methods as we come into the end. We could give a wild card vote to the community. That would be as far as the changes I would be willing to make. Because I think anything else changes it too much.
Well, we'll see if you can carry the day in the backroom arguments. But certainly, I think there'd be something to be said for asking our audience what they feel about these final four. Call of Cthulhu, Deadlands, Gumshoe, and the ingenue Blades in the Dark.
Point. Now that we're down to just four options, it will fit in a poll.
Irrespective of how we got there, by the way, look at those four games, and would you not agree that they're all classics? Like, they are genuine works of art, even if they're different and flawed in different ways and strong in different ways. Those are four good RPGs.
And diverse, which is I kind of like as well. Yeah, absolutely. Scarr, you a fan of diversity? Classics?
Yes,
either of you?
I would say. I say we've got a good lineup here. But yeah, I feel like I sort of look forward to a bit more big slobber knockdown at this last four. But yeah, we'll be hashing out. I still like the term fatal four way as the best way to describe this. But we'll see if someone comes in with a steel chair There it is. The community coming down the ramp with the steel chair.
If it's anyone who's going to do that, I'm given to believe it'll be the Undertaker before he retires for the 18th time.
Well, interesting on that. Like, if you look at what we've got here, we've got two kind of like spooky, very, very old heritage games here in Cthulhu and Deadlands. They've been around since like I even got in the hobby. And then we've got two fantasy, or we've got two kind of newcomer variation systems here in Gumshoe and Blades in the Dark. So that's like, we've got two like seriously deep-rooted contenders and two, like, we love their potentials.
So, sorry, Cthulhu's like Undertaker. Deadlands is John Cena. I don't know enough.
Gumshoe is older than you think, but go on.
Gumshoe's older.
Fair.
Blades of the Dark is probably Orange Cassidy. Gunshoe would be 2005. You could go Daniel Bryan. You could go CM Punk. Maybe you could go Samoa Joe. Something in the 2010, 2005 kind of indie scene.
Yeah,
I feel a title card graphic coming on.
I also like that thematically they kind of work against each other. So you've got the investigators in Gumshoe seeing if they can foil the heist being planned in Blades in the Dark, and the investigators in Call of Cthulhu seeing if they can work out the evil magics of Deadlands. So there's there's thematic opposition between them, which I like as well.
Deadlands and Call of Cthulhu, in fact, had a crossover. The fabulously named Adios Amigo.
Well, I can't think of they'll be crossing fists next time we meet, but I can't think of a better place to leave it this evening. So, folks, we've been the Adventuring Party. Thanks for joining us for yet another bracket fight. This was our semi-final, leading into what should be our final fatal four-way. But for now,
adios, amigos.
This party's over. Thank you for listening to the Adventuring Party. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can head on over to SpeakPipe and drop us a line. Or you can join us on our Discord server, where we keep the party going after hours. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, and Twitter. Or you can email the hosts at party@theadventuringparty.net. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike version 3 license. But you probably knew that already. We hope you enjoyed the episode and look forward to seeing you back here next week. Goodbye.